And welcome back to another daily devotion. I'm Pastor Roy here at Woodlawn Christian Church in Lake City, Iowa, and this devotion is for Monday, July 24th of 2023. We are in the book of 2 Corinthians, though we are very close to the end. We are in chapter 12. Today we're only going to look at three verses, 11, 12, and 13 is all we're going to look at today. Probably we'll finish this book of 2 Corinthians Wednesday, maybe Thursday. I don't think we'll get to Friday by any means. I think I'll do a little bit of a synopsis of First and Second Corinthians at the end. Whether that'll be on Thursday, maybe Friday, we'll see. But at any rate, we are going to look at just three verses today and kind of see, trying to look for some undertones of what's going on in Paul's mind, and maybe how that might apply to us in our interactions with our church family, but also our loved ones and even people at work. If you've ever worked retail, sometimes some of this might flow over into retail, or perhaps even if you've worked in the food industry. They always say everyone should work in the food industry so that they understand people. I've never worked in the food industry. My son is a head chef. I mean, actually, he's a restaurant manager now of a restaurant down in Florida, and going to be going off to the Culinary Arts Institute in New York here in a few months, and going to be advancing his career within the food industry. My daughter's been a server. My wife's been a server. So they all understand the food industry. I don't. I've never worked in it. But my understanding is that you really need to do that. So I'm told by my family. But nonetheless, I digress. This may help us to understand some of our interactions with people, or at least let us commiserate in misery with Paul. Perhaps that's a more accurate thing. So let's look at these three verses, 11, 12, 13, and talk a little bit more about them. I have been a fool. You forced me to it, for I ought to have been commended by you. For I was not at all inferior to those superlative apostles, even though I am nothing. The signs of a true apostle were performed among you in all patience with signs and wonders and mighty works. For in what were you less favored than the rest of the churches, except that I myself did not burden you? Forgive me this wrong. Okay, now remember, and again at the end I may do a brief summary of both First and Second Corinthians, and maybe talk a little bit about First Clement, which is also written to the Church of Corinth. We'll see. Never know where I'm going sometimes. That's too many days out for me. But here, I have been a fool. You forced me to it, for I ought to have been commended by you. They're questioning Paul's credentials. Again, he brings up in verse 11 those superlative or super in some translations, those superlative apostles, those other folks that are seeming to trying to steal some of Paul's billing, so to say, or some of his thunder, trying to supplant him, or not surpass him, but more supplant him, I think. I shouldn't have to be trying to justify myself with you. I helped you get started. I spent a year and a half with y'all. I should be being commended by you. The signs of a true apostle were performed among you in all patience, signs and wonders and mighty works. Paul did his best there. And the only thing he said, and he points out again this whole thing about they're talking about that because you didn't pay me, that I was somehow of less value to you, which seems a bit crazy. Paul was getting his remuneration from other sources. He wasn't getting paid by them, but he was being supported by other churches. How are they less favored? And the point there is that sometimes Paul probably wrote more letters to the church in Corinth than any of the churches. He spent more time there than he probably spent in any of the other churches. Paul seems to have given them more than the lion's share of his attention. It would be what we see from this, perspective. So many years and years and years and millennia away from it, but there's the appearance that Paul gave the extra mile for these guys and gals. It wasn't that he just did a little for them. He did a lot. He went above and beyond what he normally would have done. Because some places he was only there, in and out and gone in short order, and yet the churches, flourished after he was there. They just that little spark was all that it took. But yet here, perhaps there's the old thing about you become too familiar. Perhaps Paul came too familiar for them to have an import. But we can kind of look at that in our own church family. Sometimes the ones we do the most for are the ones that are the least appreciative. Certainly are some of the ones that demand the most sometimes. And how do we deal with that? Sometimes they're the ones that just won't straighten out. They won't come back to the right kind of behavior, yet they demand more and more of you, even though they themselves are, still causing problems, still not getting with the program, still not renouncing their sins and not trying to get away from a sinful life, yet they expect more and more from you. It'd be the same way with your children. Sometimes the child that you do the most for is the one that rebels the hardest and will be the one that gives you the least respect. And how do we deal with that brokenness, that brokenheartedness? If you've ever experienced those kinds of things, whether it be family or friends or church or what have you, or even in work, it can happen, as I mentioned, the food industry. The table that you waited on the hardest, that you rushed and got them more water and what have you, and refilled their teas. I drink iced tea usually at the restaurant, and I don't let me run out of tea, by golly. Always give you an extra tip if you make sure my tea is always full. That's a cue if you're a waitress and you're ever waiting on me. Make sure that there's always iced tea, because that'll get you a better tip. But at any rate, I digress again. It's those, sometimes it's those that you give the most to that expect more and respect you the least and demand more, and get indignant and throw things in your face. How do we deal with that? Well, Paul's trying to, he's defending himself here, but at the same time, he's going to take a twist here. He could get just bloody nasty with them, but he's not going to do that. We're going to pick up here as we go along the next few days and see what Paul's response is, more or less. But at the same time, remember, he didn't sugarcoat their sins all throughout those letters, those numerous letters, probably 4 or 5 letters that he wrote to the church in Corinth. He's not sugarcoating. He's telling them of their a great deal of sexual sins that were involved in first, way back, and we'll probably bring those back up again at the end here. But Paul doesn't. He's not going to completely sugarcoat it, but at the same time, let's tune back in. Later this week, we'll come to what Paul's response is at the end of the letter. Very well. With that, I'm going to let you go for today. Leave you hanging, kind of a cliffhanger today. Have a blessed day, and please, if you enjoy these videos, please do like and subscribe. We'd love to have you back. Make a kind comment below. We'd love to hear from you. We are drawing near to the end, and again, I am going to be gone on some vacation days from the 3rd I'll be back into the church on the 14th. So the devotions will stop on the 2nd and pick back up on the 14th of August, because we're taking some vacation time to go see our son down in Tallahassee before he heads up to New York State, which he'll be doing I believe at the end of August is when I think he moves up there. Exciting times. So with that, I'm going to let you go. I digress again. Have a blessed day, and please, please, please be a blessing to someone today. Remember, Jesus does love you. He loves your brothers and sisters too. He loves everyone. Make sure you tell everyone that. Take care.